Hey guys, this is Brian with the Ecotechnified channel, and I'm here today to tell you how to make great fertile soil out of composted horse manure. So come along. Okay, so right here we've got about a week-old pile of horse manure, and you'll see it's steaming out of that hole. That hole had this PVC tube in it with holes drilled in it. I pulled it out so you guys can see the steam. I just pulled it out. It's really nice and hot in there. Let's see. Let's just take a bit of a feel in there. Oh yeah, that's pretty hot. Well over 100 degrees in there. It's probably around the, I would say in the core of the pile, we're probably reaching optimum temperatures. I think that's somewhere around 180 degrees. So this has been sitting here a week, like I said, and it still kind of looks like horse manure. I cover my piles with cardboard so that they get protected from the drying effects of the sun and the soaking rain, especially in the spring and the fall, because here in Northwest Arkansas we get wet springs and wet falls and wet winters, and so except for the heat of the summer, the rain poses a real issue for composting, so I have to cover my piles. And in the summer I have to cover my piles or else the sun will dry out the top layer and make it into a hard crust. But in one way that's a bit of an advantage once the compost is all done, because this composted horse manure, when it's finished, can act both as a fertile soil and it can also act as a mulch on the top layer that dries out. Although it does make it hard to plant seeds in, but once you've got plants in place, that mulch layer on the top is really great to have. So let's move on to an older pile that is pretty much finished. There's the garden. My overgrown tomato plants that I've trimmed, but I need to rip them out because it's getting to be in the cold season now that we're at the beginning of November. Okay, you can see I've got the heat pipes in this one too. But this pile of manure with extra goodies mixed in has been sitting for several weeks now. I think probably about 5 or 6 weeks, and I've turned it about once a week so I can put the wet core on the outside and the dry outside on the inside. This is some really good stuff. It's very cool now. It stopped cooking quite a bit ago, and I just haven't taken it out yet. I want you guys to see what you can expect with finished compost. Still going to have some chunks. That's one thing about horse manure, is that even after it's composted, you're still going to have chunks that hold together, because horses are not ruminant animals. They only have one stomach, and so the manure that comes out is not like a cow patty that is all sloppy and very very moist and broken up. With a cow patty, you can't really tell what was in there before, but with a horse, the manure, you can definitely tell that it was eating grass, if you're feeding it grass. If you're feeding grain, it's going to be a little bit of a different story, but our horses eat primarily grass on the pasture. So you can see there's still brown grass clippings in here, but that's totally fine. We've got an extremely high carbonaceous content in here that soaks up water and holds it. So I grow in 100% of this soil. My garden is 100% of this composted horse manure, and all summer I did not water my tomato garden. I went only on rain, and we went over 30 days without rain this summer, and I didn't have to do anything because this holds water content very, very well. The top layer will be dry, but you stick your hand in the soil and just an inch or two down after a month with no rain, and you will still have really great moisture retention here. It's also extremely fertile. I grew the biggest sunflower I've ever seen this summer in this stuff, and I had an amazing tomato harvest. All right, so here's what you're gonna do to turn it. I'm gonna take out the heat pipes. And then you're just gonna shove the fork in and turn it. Oh yeah, look at that good stuff. This is delicious. It still smells a little bit like manure because, like I said, this is a week-old pile and it's pretty fresh. But you can definitely see this stuff is on its way to being usable in the garden. All I do is just kind of stick the fork in and flip over in about every spot of the pile so that everything gets a renewed supply of oxygen, and we can mix up the stuff that's dried out and the stuff that's still really moist. Because what you want with your compost is for, in general, for it to be about as damp as a wrung out sponge. You don't want to be able to grab a fistful and squeeze any water out of it. But you also don't want it to be dry, or you're not going to have an environment that's moist enough for the actinobacteria to survive in. It's not really that difficult to achieve that balance of moisture. You can just kind of go by how it feels. See, I take this. Ooh, that is hot. I can squeeze this. Now a little water's coming out because we've had some pretty heavy rain in the past few days, and the cardboard doesn't keep it all out. So that's really good that I'm flipping this, because the heat that's being generated by the bacteria in here is going to heat up the water that is in the top, that was in the top layer that I just mixed in here. The top layer got all soaked with the rain because I didn't have a large enough layer of cardboard on here. And they're going to heat it up so that it comes out as steam. So it's not the end of the world if you've got a little bit too much moisture. You just got to make sure that you turn it enough to supply oxygen to the bacteria so that they can continue heating it, and so that they can breathe oxygen and survive. Otherwise, if you deprive them of oxygen by not turning a moist pile, a wet pile enough, you're going to go into what's called anaerobic digestion, anaerobic composting. And that's really not what we want right here. Anaerobic composting in a compost pile takes much, much longer because it's much lower temperature, and it also can tend to be pretty smelly. So you can leave an anaerobic pile sitting for months and it may not do very much for you. But an aerobic, oh no. Right, so as I was saying, you want an aerobic, oxygenated scenario in your compost pile so you can get the actinobacteria up. They can generate the heat that you need to break down your manure fast enough, and you can have really good, fertile, usable soil at the end of a few weeks instead of several months that you would need for a cold compost pile. I'm going to show you the goodies here that I like to mix into my compost, my horse manure, to get it all nice and good and nutritious. Got tea leaves and coffee grounds from my local coffee shop. I just went up to the guy at the counter who ran the place and I said, "Hey, got an idea. Why don't you just let me take your compost, your coffee grounds and tea leaves off your hands, and I'll just come pick them up whenever your buckets are full." So I just gave him the buckets myself, and he said sure. So I just get a text message every once in a while and I just switch the buckets out. So that's free nutrition for my soil. Now it presents a bit of a challenge because this stuff is coffee and tea leaves. It adds a lot more nitrogen to what is already about twice the nitrogen of what you need for optimum composting. So I've got to balance that out with extra sawdust and wood chips and dead leaves and dry grass and things like that. Here's another. This is my kitchen compost bucket. Ooh, scary. Okay, we'll wait to open that again until I dump it in. The other bucket is more tea leaves and coffee grounds. It's snapped shut though, and I don't want to take the time to open it. So here's another shot of the finished product. It's just nice and crumbly. And it smells great. It smells just like it came out of the forest floor, which is really how you want it to smell. Finished compost is going to have a nice, just neutral, earthy scent. That's the number one indicator that I use. That and the look. The smell and the look of the compost is those are my indicators that I really use. After I got the hang of it, you can really tell. I mean, it's supposed to look and feel and smell like soil. So that's really just kind of a good rule of thumb. If it doesn't look and feel and smell like soil, then you probably got an issue. All right, here's the pile that I showed you, but this is about 3 weeks later. And I know that it's still pretty warm despite it getting down into the 20s here recently, because we have some field mice living in our compost pile. Oh, there he goes. Yep. Go on, that little guy. I don't know if there's another one. We've had a pair of field mice living around here, around the compost piles lately. Still steamy, because about halfway between last time I recorded and today, I added another wheelbarrow full of fresh horse manure to the stuff that was already going, so that's going to make this pile take a little longer to get finished, but more soil at this point for my garden is better than quicker soil. This is just kind of a shot to show you in progress after a while later what it's going to look like. It's still not ready, still steaming. It does have that earthy smell though. It doesn't smell like manure anymore. So that's one sign that it's on its way. But the temperature, it's still pretty warm in there and steaming, so that means it's not ready. And the look, doesn't look like soil yet, it still looks like manure. Here's the one responsible for giving us our compost. His name's Cobalt. Hey boy, what you doing? The one thing that I found in composting horse manure that is essential to completing the process is a compost sifter. I built this one recently, got it all painted up to keep the wood preserved longer outdoors, because I don't want to move this in and out of doors, so it's just going to be exposed to the elements. It's initially framed up with just some 2x4s, as you can see, just some pine 2x4s, and then on the outside I've got some 1x's, some strips of some rough cut oak that I got off of pallets, and I've got these strips on here to hold the hardware cloth on. So I bent the hardware cloth to fit the size of the sifter, and then it goes up in there, and once it's up there, then I would screw on these oak strips to hold it in place permanently. And it may look like it's upside down, but I want it this way so that compost that I dump on here can kind of be in the sifter as opposed to on top of the sifter. I'll show you how it works. So here's some compost that's finishing up in another bin from the one I showed you earlier. So say I would dump a few shovelfuls in here and then take a post piece like this and I would just run it on top, back and forth. There's probably a better way to do this. Maybe someday I'll get a piece with a nice handle on it. But once you run it through, since this is half-inch square hardware cloth, see what you're left over with is fine pieces. So this organic matter is much more usable because it's what we call friable or friable, depending on how you like to pronounce it. It's easy to manipulate, and it's just broken up into finer pieces instead of having the chunks like you're used to seeing with horse manure like this. One note that I should make to you about composting horse manure is that I source my manure from horses that I keep in our pasture, and my wife and I feed our horses just pretty much hay and a little bit of grain when they need it, but most of their diet comes from being on the pasture. So it's really clean manure. There's very little in the way of worming medicine in there. My wife just puts a rotating schedule of wormer in the horse feed. It's something like they only get the same wormer a couple times a year, and they only get wormed a few times a year. It's pretty seldom. But if you are getting your horse manure from like a stable somewhere where they regularly give wormer to their horses, then you might have some issues with your compost being toxic to worms. Now, that's not something that I've found out from personal experience, but I have read on permaculture forums that people have had problems with horse manure that has wormer in it, killing earthworms. And you don't want that in your garden because, well, I mean, you know, that's pretty obvious why. So anyway, that's just something I felt like it was important to mention for this video, because I'm freely using just all the horse manure I can get out of our pasture, but you want to make sure to know where your manure is coming from and what is in it for the health of your soil. So to finish up this episode, I'm just going to tell you about the book that I found to be the best resource for information on composting. It's the Rodale Book of Composting. This book has all the information you could ever want about composting. What to put in the pile, what to leave out of the pile, whether you want to do hot or cool composting, the nutrient information on different ingredients for composting, and really anything you could ever want. The temperature, the bacteria, fungi, anything else that lives inside soil and compost, it's got it all. So if you're going to buy one book on composting, it would be this one. You can get it for pretty cheap. I got mine used, and it's just been a great resource. So thank you for watching this episode, and I'll see you next time.